Chapter 1. Come on, Reef, let her fly. Yeah, man, toss her. Reef felt the weight in his hand, hefted it, saw in his mind's eye the smooth arc it would make when he launched it out over the busy highway below them, saw as well the ripple of expressions on the faces of the drivers who would react first with startled surprise, then fear, then anger. He knew that tangle of emotions well, the sudden transformation from shock to stormy outrage that left you weak and hollow inside, like those Halloween pumpkins that little kids still carved. He and the others had stolen pumpkins last October and thrown them off the Everett Street overpass. He remembered the orange explosions they'd made as they hit the highway, the slash of meaty pulp crushed and dragged along by sliding, squealing tires. He grinned, leaned back, wound up for the throw. Jink grabbed his shoulder a split second before his arm shot forward. Cool it, Reef. Yeah, hissed Bigger. Cops. A white Metro police car pulled out of Carver Avenue and cruised down Birmingham on a course that would take it under the Park Street overpass on which they stood. They waited motionless, watching the white car move toward them, then flash its turn signal and pull over to the curb. They could see the patrolman behind the wheel take a microphone from the dash, hold it to his mouth, and begin talking, all the while looking up at the three teenagers standing by the metal railing that kept vehicles and pedestrians from falling into the traffic below. Reef swore. Pocketing the rock in his leather jacket, he muttered, Be another one long in a minute. Let's get out of here. He and the others cut across to the other side of the overpass where the cop couldn't see them, then loped northward up Park Street. From below, the cop wouldn't know which direction they'd gone, or even if they left the overpass at all. But they kept jogging anyway till they made it to Patterson, cutting through the empty lot between Fishman's Mini Mart and yet another used CD store. This one didn't even have a sign up yet. Not that it mattered, it wouldn't last any longer than the one before it. By the time they got to the pit, they'd slowed to a walk, sharing swallows from the bottle they'd snagged earlier off a bum on Wickham. Bigger had been worried they'd catch some kind of disease, but Reef and Jink had laughed at him, called him an old woman, shamed him into taking the first gulp. The rum had burned their throats, but it took the edge off their rancor and put, as Reef's grandmother used to say, a bit of a glitter on what otherwise had been a lousy day. For a moment, Reef could almost hear her voice in his head. Coming from a woman who'd never swallowed a drop of alcohol in her life, those words had always been funny. He tried now to think of the last time he'd seen Nan alive, but the image of her lying in the cheapest casket Prull's funeral home offered eclipsed his other memories of her. She'd been wearing the black dress she had bought 2 years earlier at Zeller's, the only dress he'd ever seen her buy new. Even at 70% off on the final clearance rack, it had been an extravagance. But she needed something to wear to her husband's funeral. He remembered how Nan had wept quietly all through the service. Reef had just been glad to see the son of a bitch laid out. He drained the bottle, then drove it into the alley between the pit and Wade's laundry. Miraculously, it bounced twice before shattering, the combination of sounds boomeranging between the brick buildings. No one came out to investigate. Lou Wade had learned the hard way that it was bad for business to worry about what went on in the abandoned building next door. That fires had a habit of starting next to his laundry's ventilation stack after police showed up at the pit. Owners of the few other remaining businesses on the street knew too, knew that the decaying eyesore once known as the Patterson Hotel was off limits to prying eyes and wagging tongues. No one called the police anymore, and the few times they came by on their own, they just flashed their light and doo-wopped the siren a couple times to scare kids off. Not that it worked, but it allowed everyone to pretend it did. They sidestepped a mangled grocery cart, a rusted hubcap, the remains of a child's stroller, and climbed the crumbling stone steps to what had once been the main entrance of the hotel. Gone were the ornately carved double doors and leaded glass windows that had adorned the original threshold. In their place were battered graffiti-covered sheets of plywood nailed over the entryway, and similar sheets covered most of the basement and the first-floor windows. To discourage people even further, someone had spray-painted, "Danger, keep out," in fluorescent orange letters across the plywood that blocked the doorway. But some joker had altered it so it now read, "Danger, keep partying."